All right, let's get started. I'm being prompted by my team that it's time to go. All right, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us. My name's Ken Shaw. Today we're doing a webinar on how to build a margin-rich business with hybrid cloud backup. Here we go. Let me click on the screen. All right. The agenda for today's webinar will have three main topics. So first, we're going to be looking at key trends in cloud backup and disaster recovery, really just an outward industry view on what's going on out there in the market. Secondly, we'll move on and we'll talk about what the title of this webinar indicates, how to capitalize on these trends to grow your business. So really, how do these sort of tailwinds that are sweeping through IT around cloud, around the changes in data protection, how is that going to really impact your wallet? Thirdly, we'll then do a brief tour of Infrascale, who Infrascale is, where we've come from, how we're addressing some of these trends, and how you can work with us. And then my favorite part of the webinar is always the Q&A, which we do after that. So the actual webinar itself will go for 20, 25 minutes, and then after that we'll have just a free-form Q&A, kind of an Ask Me Anything format. That'll often go from between 15 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on how many questions we get. Now, on the topic of questions, I'd encourage you to find the questions tool in the GoToWebinar software. This lets you ask me a question at any time during the presentation. And importantly, we always raffle off a Kindle for these webinars. So if you're interested in winning a Kindle, find the questions tool. We pick one of the questions at random. So the more questions you ask, the more chances you've got to win that Kindle Fire HD. And I've got one of the new models myself, and they're pretty sweet. All right, so let's dive into the meat of the webinar. Key trends in online backup and disaster recovery, or cloud backup and disaster recovery. The first one is one that I talk about a lot. And so if you've been to a previous webinar where I've talked about this, I apologize for the repetition, but it's so important it bears repeating. The trend of increased data fragmentation. This is a real headache for anybody who's responsible for protecting business data. So in the old world, just even 10 years ago, the data landscape was relatively straightforward. You had a business who had an on-premise data center, and I use data center loosely. It might have actually just been, a workstation in the back office. But the point was that there was sort of this data castle. You could build walls around where your data sat, and inside the data castle, you had some compute, you had some storage, your apps were running there, your CRM, your ERP, whatever you were running, your accounting package was all on-prem, was within the four walls of your data castle. If there were laptops outside of it, then they were coming in over VPN, and the most important data was probably actually still sitting inside that network. Now, if you fast forward to today, and this trend has been accelerating, the data has become completely fragmented. It's now all over the place. So in the slide on the right of the screen here, we've sort of got a picture of the new world. And there's really been three things going on that has caused this splintering. And they are virtualization, cloud, and BYOD. But sort of taking each in turn. Well, let's just talk about the landscape. The landscape today is that the data castle's gone, right? All the valuable data is now sprinkled all over the landscape. So inside the data center, you've still got some important stuff. You've probably got some legacy apps. Your compute is now less costly than your storage, which is an interesting trend. File server is becoming less and less the center of the universe, particularly with the rise of cloud-based file sharing services. Out in user land, it's a complete mess. You've got a mixture of corporate-owned laptops and individual-owned laptops. You've got tablets, you've got mobiles, you've got four major operating systems, right? Android and iOS and mobile land. And on laptops now, Mac and Windows. Macs are outselling Windows devices. So the data landscape's become completely fragmented. Virtualization has been one of the leading causes of this, the ability for system administrators to spin up new servers really quickly. The rise of cloud has contributed to this. It's now very easy for developers, for example, to spin up cloud on an Amazon or a Heroku. Business users are putting data out in marketing clouds from Salesforce or Pardot or Marketo or whatever you like. And BYOD has been driving this fracturing of the endpoint data landscape. So that's all great. How's it relevant to today's webinar? The answer is that the old paradigm we used for data protection was very much about being able to like see and feel the data. So this concept of the data castle, the metaphor for all the data's in one spot, I can build walls around it, and it's all on the LAN, it's all in the data center. I can use, say, backup exec, and that's going to allow me to protect 99% of my data. Well, that client-server architecture doesn't really work when the data landscape looks like it does now on the red part of this slide, with data splitted across multiple hypervisors, with some data out in the cloud, with data sitting on all sorts of fragmented different endpoints. That LAN-centric client-server data protection model just doesn't work anymore. Now, funnily enough, the one thing that all of these different data pools or devices have in common is a connection to the internet and therefore a connection to the cloud. So the cloud actually becomes uniquely powerful when it comes to modern data protection because of the fragmented nature of the modern data landscape. And that point sometimes gets lost in the mix, but frankly the only data protection architecture these days that can reach all of the data is cloud-based data protection. So moving on to sort of the second big trend, there's always been, so even if cloud theoretically is the best solution for this fragmented data landscape, there's always been a lot of pushback on cloud, right? And this slide's got 3 bubbles on it, but I boil down the barriers to cloud adoption into 2 key categories: physics and emotion. One is very tangible and grounded in reality and, bound by Newtonian laws, and the other is very much a human-oriented emotional reaction. So that the physical limitations that have been a barrier to cloud adoption really boil down to how quickly can we propagate a signal along a copper wire, right? Bandwidth has been the biggest barrier to cloud adoption. And that's changed. So firstly, just the availability of high-speed broadband across the United States and across the world has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. 5 years ago, it wasn't practical for a small business to be backing up a terabyte to the cloud. Now it very much is. I've got a 50 megabit connection in my home, for crying out loud. That was unheard of 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago, that was quite difficult. So the bandwidth situation has changed dramatically. The other thing that's happened is that vendors have really gotten far more sophisticated in the types of payload reduction technology they use. Payload reduction is a fancy word for compression and deduplication, but using very clever algorithms to dramatically shrink the amount of data you actually need to push across that wire is a big part of it. And if you think back to the rise of, say, the data domains of the world who popularized target-side dedupe, once upon a time, dedupe was something that you had to go out and buy, and you bought specific equipment or software to actually do deduplication. These days, it's built into any first-class backup system that you're going to buy. And of course, there's differing levels of deduplication support and power. But if this was a buying guide, I'd say make certain the solution you're buying has sophisticated deduplication on both the source side and the target side, because that's a key. Moving over to what I call emotion, this boils down to fear of complexity and fear of security concerns. And so, one of the biggest fears in life is the fear of the unknown, and I think that was actually one of the biggest blockers to the adoption of the cloud for a long, long time, was just the fundamental lack of experience IT guys had with the cloud, the fear of letting this critical asset, our data, outside of our immediate control, getting it out into somebody else's possession. And then recently, security and privacy has come to the fore as a critical concern. So very well-publicized events like the Snowden disclosures, the Sony hacking, the fappening with Jennifer Lawrence. There's a long list of these incredibly high-profile data breaches that have been occurring. And that's actually stoking fears, again, around cloud security and cloud privacy. Well, again, there's solutions for this, right? And if this was a buying guide, I'd say look for backup vendors or cloud vendors that support private key encryption. So there's this concept of private key encryption where before data leaves your, say, laptop, it gets locked with a key that you've got. Then it goes over the wire, gets to the data center, and it gets encrypted again with a key that the vendor has. So with the data at rest sitting in at least 2 encryption bubbles, and to unlock that data, we've got to cooperate. We need your key and my key. So it's similar to, say, the banking concept of a safety deposit box. You need the bank manager and you need yourself to be there to unlock it. And the use of private key encryption is really critical to all cloud services because it eliminates the risk of the sorts of breaches that have been going on. Frankly, the breaches that have occurred are because of basic lapses in security. So when you're looking for a cloud vendor, ask the question, do you have a private key encryption mode? What happens if I lose my keys? I was doing a webinar recently with Curtis Preston on Mr. Backup, and he said the only acceptable answer to the question of what happens if I lose my key is you're in hot water, right? And so we have our ultra-safe option, for example, that you can elect to use. And if you lose your key in that scenario, we can't help you. The data really is double-blind encrypted, and you've got to have your key and our key to get it back. So the summary of this slide, if you take anything away from this, is that there have been 2 large buckets of that the barriers to cloud adoption fall into, physics and emotion, and both of those barriers are quickly receding. And then the last big trend, which is right in the title of today's webinar, is the rise of hybrid cloud backup. And so if I wish I could rearrange, you know what, the marketing team's one step ahead of me. They have rearranged this slide. Brilliant. So that's great. This slide now actually represents a historical development of the market. It doesn't start with tape. If we went back 20 years ago, we'd have backup to tape in here. But it starts with disk-to-disk, which rose to prominence in the 90s and certainly in the noughties. It became the primary enterprise backup mechanism. And of course, its variant of disk-to-disk to tape. After that, rose direct-to-cloud backup, the middle column here, where businesses were backing directly up from a server up to the cloud or from a laptop up to the cloud. And recently, in the last few years, as vendors and customers and analysts collectively have realized the limitations of both of these patterns, have emerged hybrid cloud backup. And the basic idea of hybrid cloud backup is that you're going to have a piece of equipment on-premise, and some of the data is going to flow through it, or flow to it, and then that's going to replicate everything up into the cloud. And so you can then choose to keep data on-premise or in the cloud or both. And the best metaphor I have for sort of hybrid cloud is similar to like the cable box. So when you buy Verizon or if you buy Comcast, you're buying their overall service, the channels, the content, everything they provide. But they give you this little piece of equipment which you put on your set-top box, which dramatically improves the overall experience of having cable. And that's how I think about hybrid cloud backup. It's a small piece of equipment that you can put on your customer's premise that can dramatically improve their overall cloud backup experience. Okay, so that's all well and good, but how do you actually capitalize on these trends? How is this going to affect you economically? Well, for the next few slides, we're going to look at this. We're actually going to look at the money slides. And as part of sort of explaining that, we've invented a fictional MSP, Ken's MSP. This is something that I'm doing on the side, apparently. And Ken's MSP is designed to be representative of the sorts of folks we help all the time. So looking at Ken's business, he's got a break-fix shop, 50% break-fix, 50% managed services, reselling a variety of data protection services. He's got a few different backup vendors that he's peddling. Lacks any true differentiation in his market, but very much built around relationships with his customers. 5 employees, 80 customers, doing about $1 million in sales. He's based in Los Angeles. And what does Ken want? 4 things. He wants more recurring revenue. He wants better client data protection. He wants to move up market. And he wants to offer differentiated services. 4 pretty simple desires for Ken's MSP. And so we're going to look at how he can achieve these 4 objectives through the use of hybrid cloud data protection solutions. All right, next slide. So the first piece of advice I'd give to Ken, I'd give to anybody in the audience, is avoid the sucker's choice. And when I was pitching this to the marketing teams, they didn't all know what I meant by the sucker's choice. Maybe it's a British colloquial expression or Australian. But the sucker's choice is where you're presented with 2 choices, both of which are bad. Imagine you walked into a restaurant and you ordered the hamburger, and the waitress said to you, "Excellent, Ken. Which one would you like to be cold? Would you like your hamburger cold, or would you like your fries cold?" Well, that's an absurd choice to be presented with. I, of course, want option C, which is neither of them to be cold. But there's an analogous question being posed to IT guys across the country, which is, when it comes to data protection, you've got to pick a pattern. You've either got to pick on-premise based or appliance-based data protection, or you've got to pick cloud-based data protection. And that really is the sucker's choice. Because the truth is, you can have both. That's what hybrid cloud is. And each of these paradigms have pros and cons. So here on the slide here, we have the pros and cons of both cloud-based backup and appliance-based backup. With cloud-based backup, there's no system maintenance. You've got data mobility, easy deployment, central management. But it's got some drawbacks. We talked about it when we were talking about physics. Data upload time is slow. Recovery is slower. The data leaves the network, so you lose some control. It depends on the security of the vendor. Does the vendor have double-blind encryption or not? And then contrasting that with appliance-based backup, it's got some great strengths. Supports very, very large data sets, hundreds of terabytes. You've got data sovereignty, you've got control, you've got possession. Quick recovery, because you're right there on the LAN. You can recover at gigabit speeds, at 10 gigabit. You can back up to many locations. But it's got its drawbacks too. Capacity planning is an absolute bear. It's expensive. Hardware fails. You've got single points of failure. Management of multiple pizza boxes sitting on heaps of different racks is a real pain. System updates is a pain. So I look at this, and I'm sure you look at this, and the immediate question is, well, why can't we have a magical solution that combines the pros of both and has none of the drawbacks of either? And that's the promise of hybrid cloud. So don't make the sucker's choice. Don't choose one or the other. Don't ask your customers to make the sucker's choice. Pick a hybrid cloud solution that combines both of these things. So with a hybrid cloud backup solution, you've got on-premise capability, you've got cloud capability. And I feel strongly about this because, really, if you're not selling a hybrid cloud backup solution, it's a lose-lose proposition. What I mean by that is that roughly half the world out there wants to use the cloud, and roughly half the world out there doesn't want to use the cloud. So if you've only got one of these things in your toolkit, then definitionally you're asking half of your audience to be unhappy with you, right? And that might be fine for the political reality in Washington, but it's not cool in your average IT person's business. So asking your customers to choose between these is just something you don't need to do. With a hybrid cloud solution, you can peddle one solution, and you can walk into a business that is very appliance-oriented, and they can mainly do on-premise data protection with a little bit of cloud. And over time, they could grow into consuming more cloud services, for example. Similarly, if you've got customers that are heavily into cloud, that's fine. Still use a hybrid device, because then you can keep some data on-premise for rapid recovery times, right? So if there's one thing you take away from this webinar, it's avoid the sucker's choice, and don't ask your customers to make a sucker's choice when it comes to data protection. Pick a vendor who can give you a true hybrid solution which combines the best of both worlds and avoids the pitfalls of both as well. All right, moving on. What does this mean then? Well, it means you can expand your backup reach. It means that you can charge for more data being protected. It means you can sell more services, right? It's because you've got the benefits of the cloud-based pattern we talked about earlier, the ability to deal with all of those fragmented data pools. But you also got the ability to sell into those appliance opportunities. So using a platform like Infrascale, you can then individually sell all of these services. Desktops and laptops are first-class citizens. So are physical services. So are virtual services. So is application-level protection, like doing things like exchange granular recovery. Even file sharing is built into our particular platform. So the most successful MSPs who are selling data protection services today, or what would be my advice to Ken's MSP, is craft multiple offerings that you can sell to your customers. Pick a platform vendor that can support multiple use cases, and then productize and sell each of these to your customers. And then that dovetails nicely into one of the more powerful economic lessons here is leveraging the cloud naturally allows you to move into one-time recurring revenues. So if we keep telling the story of Ken's MSP, he's been selling NetApp appliances, on-premise boxes, And so on the left here, you've got an analysis of the margin he's making, roughly 30% margin, which isn't terrible. But you sell one of those devices, it's good for 5 years, you make $11,000 one time. Maybe you make some maintenance fees, maybe you charge a little bit for installation, configuration, but that's pretty much it. Contrast that with selling in a hybrid cloud backup appliance. Firstly, it's way cheaper for the customer, right, because the customer's only going to be paying about $3,000 a month. So right off the bat, this is a more attractive proposition for any customer that's concerned about cash flow, and who isn't concerned about cash flow, right? Secondly, that then becomes an annuity stream. So over the 3-year lifetime of this particular customer, Ken's MSP is going to end up making $32,000 gross margin over that period, right? So and it's ongoing. 3 years doesn't actually have to be the life cycle. Continue to go for 4 years, 5 years. So that's our average customer lifetime is more than 4 years. So one of the benefits of moving into hybrid cloud appliances is it's an easy segue into recurring revenue streams, and recurring revenue streams are really wonderful for businesses as they layer up over time. And additionally, the margin is richer in cloud-based services. So the margin in selling metal, we all know, has come under pressure in recent years, and I think that trend's going to continue. Whereas the margin in cloud services is actually very robust. And so you get several things. Firstly, you get a monthly subscription, you get monthly recurring ongoing revenue. Secondly, you frankly just get a lot more of it, right? So there's actually a lot more revenue flowing into your business. Thirdly, you can delight your customer because your customer's actually, it feels less painful for the customer. He's only paying a couple $1,000s a month. That feels a lot better than shelling out, say, 50 grand right up front. And then fourthly, and most importantly, you're making more margin at the end of the day. So yes, there's more revenue, and yes, it's more predictable, but it's also more profitable. And that's, at the end of the day, the most powerful economic lesson. So here's a quote from one of our partners, from Joe Popper at Computer Gallery. Recurring revenue allows you to build a predictable and profitable business model compared to the reactive way of doing business where you sit and wait for the phone to ring. And Joe's really nailed that there. It's predictable and it's profitable. So what's the next bit of advice we've got for Ken's MSP who wants to make money from hybrid cloud data protection? Say yes to private cloud opportunities. So as you're dealing with larger entities, so enterprises and governments, it's pretty common for them to want to leverage cloud-based backup technology. They like the cloud-based management. They like the elegance of the solution. But they want the data to actually sit back in their data center, right? They want to control the cloud. Well, when you're looking for backup vendors, try and find one who's going to actually give you private cloud support. So a bit of shameless Infrascale promotion. With our system, you can deploy our entire stack into someone's data center. So Long Beach School District, let's take them as an example. They're a customer of ours. Imagine they wanted to offer cloud backup to all of their students. They're not doing this with us presently. They could, right? They could put our software in their data center and then run a cloud service that comes back to their data center. We can then help them replicate that data and protect that data. And Ken's MSP would sell that solution to the Long Beach customer in this particular case, and not have to walk away from it. So this is analogous to the sucker's choice we talked about earlier. With most cloud backup vendors, they'll only support their own cloud, whereas it's critical to find a cloud backup vendor that supports any cloud, whether it be a private cloud like the Long Beach example, whether it be Amazon, Azure, it doesn't matter. Cloud backup solutions should support multiple different cloud hosting infrastructures. All right, so let's have a look at the end of the day of what does all this mean for Ken's MSP. So this is an example here taken from one of our real-life customers. Ken's MSP is actually a real-life customer. We've just changed his name to be me. But so the total data being protected is 4 terabytes, split among all of those customers we talked about earlier. The total fees being collected across all of those customer accounts is roughly $4,000 a month that's coming in. The cost Ken's MSP has, in this case to Infrascale, is just under $1,000. And so the profit he's making is $3,000 every month, predictably, reliably. And so that's an annuity stream that goes on for a long time. You only have to sell the end customer once, but the revenue keeps rolling in. It's a really powerful business model. And these are very achievable numbers. If you be interested in learning more about how this works, we've got some ROI calculators that you can use. I recommend you talk to one of our partner specialists who can walk you through an ROI analysis. But if you're not selling hybrid cloud solutions, you really ought to consider it. If you're not getting recurring revenue in your business, you really must consider it. And we'd love to help educate you about what options there are in the market, so give us a call. So with that, I'll turn to a little bit of an overview of Infrascale, and then we'll do a Q&A. So feel free to start typing in the questions, and I'll go through them as they come on the question stream. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Infrascale, we've been around since 2006. We incorporated Infrascale in 2012, which is why this slide says that. We're headquartered in Los Angeles, got around 150 employees worldwide, and what we focus on doing is here in the upper left corner, complete data protection. So we sell a platform that combines cloud backup, disaster recovery, data archiving, and file sharing in one single solution. And it's a bit like Salesforce. It's an entire platform. You get all of this functionality when you buy it. You might say to yourself, well, I don't need all of that today, but I guarantee you you're going to need all of that in the future. And so one of the great things about the Infrascale platform is that you can buy it and grow into it over time. And lots of people are doing that. So when we look by the numbers, there are more than 20 billion objects, which basically means files, stored in the Infrascale cloud. We've got over 1,000 partners in the Infrascale partner network, 1 million devices being protected, and 16 points of presence around the world. This slide really encapsulates what we do, right? So when you look at the use cases on the left-hand side of this grid, cloud backup, disaster recovery, data archiving, file sharing, and then look across the top with all of these different form factors, right? This grid represents the sum total of everything Infrascale can do for you. I call it the dartboard. And it's a pretty good bet that if you walk into one of your customers and you have a data protection challenge, you can throw a dart at this diagram and you can hit it, right? So that if you need to do cloud backup for file servers, or if you need to do long-term archiving for a bunch of laptop data, or if you want to do file sharing across all these devices, we can do all of that. If you want first-class hypervisor-level VMware backup, we can do that. More than 500 OS variants covered, but it boils down to Linux, Windows, Unix in server land, VMware, a hypervisor level, OS X, Windows in laptops, and then the major mobile operating systems. And then at the bottom, we talk about choice of target. So we support public cloud as a target, private cloud as a target, hybrid cloud backup appliances, which we sell, and just standard disk-based appliances. So wherever your data is coming from and wherever you want to send it to, we've got a solution for you. What's powerful about that for as an MSP is getting rid of multiple vendors. Who wants to have 3 or 4 different vendors to do a job that you can do with a single vendor? So we are that tool that you can pull out of your toolkit and use in nearly all of the data protection scenarios that you're going to come across. And really what we're trying to do is make sure you've got the right tool for the job. I grew up on a farm in Australia, and my dad used to always say, if you've got the right tool for the job, any job's easy. Well, that applies to farm work and it applies to computer software, right? So we design this in conjunction with our partners. We crowdsource our roadmap. We work with you to find out what you need, and we build out our functionality to meet that demand. So really encourage you to call in and talk to one of our partner specialists. Let me just tell you about our hybrid cloud solution, and then we'll move on to the Q&A. But this slide really encapsulates how our hybrid cloud works. You've got a box in the middle, right? So a pizza box in the middle that you'll put into your customer's premise. And that includes hardware, that includes the backup and recovery software you need, it includes all policy management you need, and built-in cloud replication. What can it protect? Well, it can protect a lot. On the left, it can protect physical servers, virtual servers, a variety of applications, SQL Server Exchange, workstations, desktop and laptops. It's got a wonderful endpoint protection system. Even smartphones and tablets are supported. You can use this overall platform to then back up to the Infrascale cloud, to other public clouds like Amazon or Azure, or even a private cloud that you can set up, right? That's a very profitable way to go. You've got a 90% deduplication rate built in through our patented DDFS layer, which massively reduces the data payload and dramatically increases the throughput of the solution. Across the top, you've got the use cases supported. You can do cloud backup, disaster recovery, archiving, and file sharing. And down the bottom, it's a single pane of glass. I really want to emphasize that. Imagine if you could have a single pane of glass where you could manage all of your clients' data all of their devices. So one place where you could see your 15 clients, each client's got a few different servers, you can see all of those, all of their endpoints, you can see all of those, all the mobile devices, you can do geolocation, you can do remote wipe, you can do bare metal backup, or you can do archiving, you can do exchange granular recovery. That's the Infrascale portal. A single pane of glass that manages all of your data protection challenges and deployments, and it's incredibly powerful. If you do call in and talk to one of the partner specialists, ask them to give you a demo of the dashboard, and I think when you see it, you'll be really excited about what it can do for you and your business. All right, so Infrascale is making backup as a service easy for businesses to consume with their simple cloud-based backup offering from Storage Switzerland. And that brings us to the end of the webinar. So if you've got any questions, please stay on the line and ask them now. I'll go through those. And remember, we're giving away that Kindle Fire HD. Or if you'd like to talk to somebody more knowledgeable than me, and I assure you there are many, the phone numbers are on the screen. The US free call number is 877-896-3611. Alternatively, you can follow us on Spiceworks or LinkedIn or Twitter, or visit our website. Our website's a great resource. It's filled with information. So with that, I'll turn to the questions. Okay, so the first question comes from Morris. This is a little off topic, but is there a feature set comparison between FileLocker and MS SkyDrive and Google Drive? I need to justify FileLocker against the other two. Morris, there absolutely is, and you should talk to one of our partner specialists or one of our sales engineers in particular. They have these, what we call battle cards, which compares our solutions. The short answer is FileLocker is a much more sort of big boy toy than SkyDrive or Google Drive. Built-in enterprise encryption, that private key encryption we talked about earlier, sophisticated policy management, really is a wonderful tool when you look at those two things. Private cloud support, you can bridge out SharePoint and NAS functionality. We've got a lot more advanced integrations with Microsoft's own technology that they do, ironically. So yeah, talk to a partner specialist or an SE for that. Another question from Morris. I service the SME market. I'm looking for a virtual appliance solution that is designed for file backup only. And a secondary appliance in a private cloud scenario has a lower price point than the current appliance. Even better monetized on a Vera appliance cows. So, Morris, I'm not sure what your question there is. Are you asking if we support those patterns? If you can just clarify, I'll move on to the next question, but then come back to you. Courtney asks, could I get a link to the recording? I missed the first 20 minutes. Yes, Courtney, I'm sorry. I should have done this in the housekeeping section. There is being a video made of the webinar, and that'll be up on our website in a day or two. Also, you will get an email with a link to that video when it's ready. And lastly, if any of you would like to use this presentation deck, you can get in touch with one of our partner specialists, and they can actually give you the PowerPoint file. Okay, so Morris hasn't added anything. But Morris, I'll try and answer your question there. So you're looking for a virtual appliance solution that's designed for file backup only, and a secondary appliance in a private cloud scenario has a low price point. Okay, so we support that. So we have a range of what we call our data protection appliances, and they come in both physical and virtual flavors. So if I understand what you're saying, you want to put virtual appliances out in each of your client sites. So let's pretend you have 5 clients. So that's cool. We give you 5 virtual DPA appliances, and they do file backup. They also do a lot of other fancy stuff, but you can just use the file backup. And then, yes, you can replicate all of those back to your private cloud environment, and you could buy one of our physical appliances to drop it in your private cloud. And I think you'd find that our hardware is actually very cost-effective. Or you could continue to use just our software technology. And then wrapping all of that together is the dashboard I talked about earlier. So you'd still have all of the benefits of cloud-based monitoring, policy management, and single pane of glass control, even though that would be a private cloud deployment. Lisa asks, is Infrascale HIPAA compliant? Page on website, re-HIPAA is blank. Oh, Lisa, that's concerning. I'll have the marketing team look into that webpage. But yes, we are HIPAA compliant. And if as a partner you ever need to get our business association agreement or get a business association agreement between your end customer, you, and with us, we could do that. We've got some partners who specialize in selling HIPAA-compliant backup solutions to dentists, doctors, and that's a very margin-rich part of the data protection landscape. Courtney asks, how does this tie in with AWS? Well, Courtney, you can host our backend on AWS if you want. So imagine you've got a customer who insists that the data resides in Amazon, where you can buy our whole solution. We'll do the backup. You get everything we've talked about, the backup for Exchange, the servers, bare metal, physical servers, virtual servers, endpoints. But at the end of the day, all that data is going to flow up to basically virtual appliances running on Amazon. And again, you'll still manage all of that through Dashboard. So one of the things we're trying to do is just simplify the darn thing, right? So to us, it doesn't really matter if data goes to Amazon or goes to an Infrascale data center. You should be able to use the same tool set to manage everything. And so that's what we've built. So you can definitely host on Amazon if that's what you want to do, Courtney. Dan asks, what type of training do you provide for your partners? Dan, that's a terrific question. Two major buckets of training that we provide to our customers. The first thing is onboarding. So when you come on board, you get assigned to a dedicated sort of onboarding specialist who takes you through the systems, teaches you in one-on-one or one-on-many webinar-type forums how to use the product. It's very tailored to you and to your needs. You might want to get your sales team trained on some things and your technical staff on other things. You might just want to do it all yourself. So there's that whole onboarding training. Then after that, there is a library of educational content that's continuously being added to in what we call our Partner Resource Center. Now, a Partner Resource Center is something all of our partners get access to. And it's got a lot more than just training videos in it. The training's wonderful. But there's also email marketing guides that you can use. There are brochure templates. There are this webinar deck. There's sort of a general version of this that you can whack your logo on and use. So there's a rich library of resources you can use to sell and market your data protection solutions to your customers there, in addition to that rich training library. Gavin writes, what are the specific agreement terms for partners, for example, month-to-month, annual, etc.? Gavin, there are a lot of different programs, a lot of different ways it can be sliced and diced. So rather than me hashing it by trying to summarize it here for you, I'd encourage you to call in and have a chat to one of our partner specialists. All of our programs are very easy to get going with. You could call in today and you could literally be up and running and using Infrascale data protection products tomorrow. I'd also encourage everyone on the line, there's a free trial of the platform, so you can actually go and get this platform and use it for free and use some of the tools that you've heard me talk about today. See it for yourselves. I think that's probably one of the best ways to get to know our solution. Have one of the sales engineers give you a brief tour and then play with it for a little while. Dirk asks, will the Springboks beat the Wallabies in the next World Cup? Dirk, you're banned from all future webinars. Gavin writes, what types of sales collateral would be available to partners? So Gavin, that's, I think I touched on this a little bit when I was talking about the Partner Resource Center, but specifically sales collateral. Okay, there are some data sheets in there, there are battle cards in there, there are brochures that you can rebrand in there. There are email marketing templates that you can rebrand in there. There's a webinar deck. We're working on a program where we're going to be doing partner-sponsored events, like an event in a box, where we'd work with you, we'd get a table for 10 at a Ruth's Chris. You would bring all your customers to that event, and we'd send one of our sales engineers there to sort of work as your offsider. So there's a rich array of programs you can avail yourself of as an Infrascale partner. Steve writes, backup is great, but what are the DR capabilities? We sell other products that allow for spinning up VMs on the appliance. Is that possible with your product? And what about spinning up the server in the cloud? So Steve, spinning up a server in the cloud is what we focus on. We have a service offering called Cloud Boot, which allows you to do just that. Bring up a VM and run it in the cloud. And we've been offering that service for a couple of years. We're actually going to have a series of big announcements around our Cloud Boot technology over the next few months as well. So that's we have a service offering today, and it's going to get really, really powerful. And it's going to be released at a price point that's super exciting in March. But yeah, the DR capabilities allow you can currently do right-click and boot in your local environment, not directly on the appliance, but on a Windows box in the network, so very similar. And then we can bring those VMs up running in the cloud today as well. And so, DR is core to what the platform does. Morris writes, the price of the appliance is difficult to justify to the SME market, i.e. a single photographer who has a large amount of data. Morris, a single photographer who has a large amount of data probably is a good candidate for direct-to-cloud backup, to be honest. Or maybe a virtual appliance, and then you could build your own TPA yourself. But for that sort of really micro business, I'd look at direct to cloud. I think that's probably going to be the most cost effective. My sales reps probably hate that I just said that, but that's my candid assessment there. Gavin writes, can you provide a couple of client references for us to speak with about the experience of being in partnership with Infrascale? Gavin, absolutely. So again, I recommend you talk to a partner specialist, and we're territory organized. So we've got guys in territories are, what you'd expect, east, south, west, and mountain. And so we've got local references that you can speak to. We've got out-of-state references that you can speak to. And just call in and ask to talk to a partner specialist when you're chatting to them. Make it clear that one of the things you want to do is talk to another partner. Morris writes, I'm an Infrascale MSP at the moment with customers going to JHB, Infrascale DC at the moment. Okay, good, Morris. Courtney writes, is there an ATO for GovCloud? Courtney, I'm not sure what the ATO is, but we're not currently working with GovCloud, no. Martin writes, can you give an example of the kind of data customers keep on the on-premise storage and the data they do further back up into the cloud, also in terms of difference in storage size? Martin, examples are all over the map. Generally, we would recommend that any data that's going to the appliance also get replicated to the cloud, right? The types of data that maybe you don't want to replicate to the cloud would be, say, sensitive financial information, maybe HIPAA. Those aren't, but not really for any good technical reason, right? This is more talking back to the emotion thing we talked about earlier. You might have a customer who just says, no, look, our books aren't going up to the cloud. There's really no reason for him to feel that way if your cloud provider is using double-blind encryption like Infrascale does. It's probably safer in the cloud environment than it is on the on-premise environment, to be honest. But you're going to still have customers who feel that way. So examples are really all over the map. If I flip the question around and give you an example of data where you'd want it in both, a great example of that would be, say, like your Exchange database, right? If your email server's down, your business can be down, or your booking system database. So that you would want to have locally on-premise on the appliance, end up in the cloud. That way, if the building burns down, you're covered because it's in the cloud. But if it was just user error, well, you can get it back off the box and you can be up and running really quickly. All right. Dan writes, besides the selling of the service, what are other responsibilities of the partner? Dan, other responsibilities of the partner, to maintain a certain level of, technical knowledge, to actually go through the training and make sure you learn about the solutions is one thing. And then usually first level support inquiries. So the partner would usually handle the first line support as well. Morris writes, as an MSP, is it possible for Infrascale to audit my processes to give my clients a greater sense of security? Interesting question, Morris. We've never done that before, but we'd certainly be happy to help you with that. I'd recommend you send an email to Robert Prigge. Let me know if you know who Robert is. But Robert could probably help organize something for that. Dan writes, are there any revenue commitments required to become a partner? Dan, no, absolutely not. Gavin writes, as a partner, obviously our clients would be using your products, but do you also access our customer contact info and solicit them in any way? Absolutely not, Gavin. They're your customers, so the way this works is we have a relationship with you. You have a relationship with your customers. We would never talk to your customers unless you asked us to, right? And sometimes that happens, like in a support case, you might actually say, oh, God, I wish Infrascale could handle this for me, and we'll do that. But we would never, ever do that without you asking us to. Steve writes, are you able to back up physical, convert to virtual, then restore as a bare metal to dissimilar hardware? Yes, Steve, we are. So the bare metal module within the Infrascale dashboard is able to do exactly that, so P2V and V2P. All right, that's the end of the questions we have on the line. So we've still got some people in the webinar room. If you've got any other questions, now's the time to ask them. I'll be here for another minute or two, and then we'll start to wrap this up. So if there's any question at all, any topic, please ask. We've had a good interactive session so far, so thanks for that participation. Okay, Steve had another question. Are additional licenses required for bare metal? Steve, depends on the program you're in. For example, if you're using our appliance technology, the answer is no. If you're using a direct-to-cloud only, there is a small bare metal fee. So again, that's where it's important to talk to a parts specialist and sort of understand, what you're looking for. If you wanted to do bare metal on like 100 machines, I'd recommend our appliances because it's sort of all included. Whereas if you were just talking about a few, then probably easier to go the direct-to-cloud route. All right, well, we don't have any other questions. So, look, thanks everyone for attending. That's been a really good interactive session. I hope the content today was useful and somewhat educational. Appreciate your time. We're doing these webinars more and more frequently, so I hope that some of you come back to future webinars. Again, I'd really encourage you to explore our website, infrascale.com. Probably the best takeaway that you, in terms of action, would be call in, ask for a demo, get your own evaluation environment, play around in our system, use the platform, see what it's capable of, and if there's one piece of advice you remember from today's webinar, it's don't make the sucker's choice. Whether you use Infrascale or whether you pick another vendor, make sure you get a vendor who can support on-premise, in-cloud, treats them both as first-class citizens, and can really help you drive that repeatable, profitable, reliable revenue streams that we talked about. It'll really make your customers' lives a lot easier, and it'll improve your business life dramatically. So with that, we will sign off. So thanks everybody for your time. Have a wonderful day.